The second walk through Father Claret's Madrid begins at the Ruiz Giménez roundabout, San Bernardo Metro Station. Its main interest is to begin by walking through one of the suburbs where Father Claret liked to exercise his apostolic ministry, and end where we started the first walk, the Plaza de Ópera. It is important to remember that in Father Claret's time, Madrid ended at the San Bernardo roundabout due to the wall built by Felipe V, and which bordered what today are usually called the boulevards. Have a nice walk. Itinerary of the second walk. We start at the end of the street of San Bernardo. First, we visit the Salesas Nuevas. Opposite, we find the Church of Montserrat. From there, we walk towards the convent of Comendadoras de Santiago. We descend towards the now disappeared chapel of Príncipe Pío. Opposite, we find the place where the convent of the Padres Paules used to be. From there, we go to the Church of San Marcos. A long path leads us to the Monasterio de la Encarnación, where we conclude our walk. It is easy to find your way along the wide street of San Bernardo downwards on the way to the Grand Via. You will soon come across a long, renovated building on the left, on the pavement of the even-numbered pavements. This is the so-called Salesas Nuevas. It is the second monastery of the order founded by Saint Francis de Sales. The first is the Salesas Reales, behind the Palace of Justice.
They were established here half a century after leaving the previous monastery. It was sponsored by the Marquis de Villena y de Estepa in 1798. In 1837, after their expulsion, the Central University was established in this convent, and the church became the main university hall. The buildings were later returned to the order. The project was designed by the neoclassical architect Manuel Bradi. The interior is a rectangular hall without side chapels, and with the choir above the portico. On the facade, by Julian San Martin, there is a relief of St. Francis de Sales giving the constitutions to St. Jean-François Frémiot, Baroness of Chantal. The church did not burn during the Civil War of 1936, but the interior was damaged.
Father Claret officiated at the solemn pontifical mass in this church, where the 40 hours devotion was celebrated in January 1859 on the feast of the patron saint and Father Saint Francis de Sales. And now let's look at the building just opposite the Church of Montserrat. Crossing Calle San Bernardo, just where the Isabel II Canal was inaugurated, we come face to face with a majestic facade. This is the Church of Montserrat, called Religiosas de Caballero de Gracia in the time of Father Claret.
It was the church of the monastery founded by Philip IV to receive the Castilian Benedictines who had been expelled from the Catalan monastery of Montserrat during the uprising in Catalonia in 1640. The church was designed by Sebastián Herrera and was begun in 1668. Only the nave, some of the chapels, and one of the towers of its ostentatious facade were completed. The planned transept and chancel were not built. The architect Pedro de Ribera's work was reduced to prodigiously decorating the facade and tower. The church is a national monument. After the Benedictines were expelled from their convent by the exclaustration, it was used as a women's prison, known as Casa Galera. Once the prisoners had been transferred to another court building, the nuns of the Caballero de Gracia, or Conceptionists, who had been thrown out of their convent, moved into it. The name of the Church of the Nuns of the Caballero de Gracia can easily be misleading because the street of the Caballero de Gracia, where there used to be the church and convent of these nuns, has now disappeared. This convent was where the famous Sister Patrocinio lived. There is another church, called the Oratory of the Caballero de Gracia, which we will visit on another walk.
Nor should we confuse it with the Church of the Hospital of Montserrat in the street of Atocha, Plazuela de Anton Martin, where Claret resided from 1859 and which we will also visit. This church was chosen together with that of San Cayetano to preach during Lent in 1858 because it was at one end of Madrid and one of the most spacious, and Father Claret was called to direct it. Don Juan Vargas, Canon of Puerto Rico, commented thus in a letter to Don Dionisio Gonzalez.
This man, Archbishop Claret, is someone of whom there is not and will not be in many lands, and perhaps the only one of his kind. After having given exercises to all kinds of people and twice to the clergy, without prejudice to the conferences we have every Tuesday, he has just made a mission to one end of Madrid, and yesterday he began another to the other. It can be said that his life is a continuous mission, having delighted all the healthy and sensible people of Madrid and displeased those who do not like this food.
And now, turning to the right and taking the Calle de Quiñones, we will soon come to a new church, called the Church of the Comendadoras de Santiago. The Comendadoras de Santiago belong to an order founded by the Knights of St. James in the 12th century. Its purpose was to pray and do penance on behalf of the Knights of the Order and take in their widows and daughters.
It is in the Plaza de los Comendadoras. The convent was built in the 17th century, with the comendadoras and friars coming from Valladolid under the direct influence of the monarch, Philip IV. The convent was completely rebuilt by Sabatini in the time of Charles III. The church, whose architects were Manuel del Olmo and José del Olmo, was completed in 1693 and is the most beautiful work of 17th century architecture in Madrid. With its high dome, counterbalanced by 4 half domes, and with details of ornamentation that are entirely Madrilenian and pre-Churrigueresque. The interior is notable for the large canvas of Santiago Matamoros by Lucas Jordan on the main altarpiece. It is the most brilliant example of Italian painting in a Madrid church. It is signed 1695. The sacristy is also the most beautiful and architectural in Madrid. It was built by Francisco Murillo, commissioned by Ferdinand VII. And was still used by the Knights of the Order for their meetings in the 19th century.
In 1861, Father Claret began the Lenten missions in this church. Chosen for its capacity and its location at one end of the city, it would be a suitable place for the first week. The procession for the beginning of Lent, organized by the Venerable Orden Tercera de los Servitas, left at 3 o'clock in the afternoon from the parish church of San Nicolas with a precious image of Nuestra Señora de los Dolores. Through the Plaza de Oriente, Cuesta de Santo Domingo, Calle Ancha de San Bernardo to the Comendadores. That year's attendance was so massive that there was no room for anyone. After Mass, Father Claret continued distributing communion for over an hour. There were more than 1,000 people. Leaving the church, we crossed the quiet and often sunny Plaza de las Comendadores, avoiding the narrow but noisy and busy Amaniel, to go along the Calle del Cristo and the Plaza de Guardias de Corps, towards the Calle Conde Duque, where the famous Cuartel de Conde Duque stands. We reach the Plaza de Cristo Martos, from where we descend to the important artery of Calle de la Princesa. If we look to the right and to the left, we can recover with our imagination two places that have already disappeared, where Father Claret left memories that are worthwhile to unearth. On the sidewalk of the even-numbered addresses, there was in the time of Father Claret the chapel of Prince Pio. This chapel, called Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, was known by the name Cara de Dios, Face of God, because of a copy of the Face of the Lord printed on the veil of Veronica was venerated there. It was much visited by the people of Madrid during Holy Week, especially on Holy Thursday, and on the days of the Verbena de la Cara de Dios, or Festival of the Face of God.
It was located in the Plaza de los Afligidos and was founded by the fourth Marquise of Castel Rodrigo, Doña Leonor de Mora, and built in 1657. It was named after Prince Pio of Savoy, Marquis of Castel Rodrigo, Cardinal. He was the one who donated the relic of the Holy Face that was kept in this chapel of the Pontifical Oratory. Sacked by the French, it was demolished and rebuilt on the opposite pavement, next to the Convent of the Afflicted. This chapel was also demolished at the end of the Civil War. The relic is preserved today in the nearby church of San Marcos, which we will see later.
On 13 March 1858, Holy Wednesday, solemn services were held in this chapel, with Father Claret preaching to all the nobles of Madrid. Entrance was controlled using an invitation card attended by a large part of the nobles who were the distinguished patrons of this sanctuary. It was one of the few occasions on which Father Claret addressed the nobles of Madrid. Almost opposite this chapel, in what is now the Plaza de Santa Maria Micaela, was the convent of the Vincentian Fathers. The convent of the Vincentian Fathers was located in this square. At that time, the street was called Calle del Duque de Osuna. One of the several palaces that the Dukes of Osuna had owned in Madrid was located there. Shortly after arriving in Madrid, Father Claret made his spiritual exercises in this residence from July 2 to 11, 1857. The resolutions he wrote the day before finishing the exercises seemed to be a program of what he proposed to do at court.
Father Pedro Sáenz, an eyewitness, writes in The History of the Congregation of the Mission in Spain several paragraphs which we transcribe here, referring to these exercises.
What a model of humility for the sons of the humble St. Vincent de Paul to see that an archbishop not only goes to the refectory to eat with them the same food without any distinction, but delighted with the modesty with which the young novices and students serve the table. The The same archbishop learns the rules of serving at table according to the practice of the community, asks permission of the visitor, Father Masnau, to grant him permission to serve the table one day, and having obtained it, he puts on his apron and, as if he were the last novice, to the unutterable surprise of the community and of those who were on retreat, he takes the tray and goes about distributing the dishes to each of the priests, students, and brothers. This same archbishop, continues Father Sain, decided one evening to address the whole community gathered in the chapel. His language, simple, fervent, and practical, moved the whole community to tears of joy on hearing from such an authoritative lips the benefit of the vocation of the missionaries and the practical way to correspond to such a singular grace. The joy experienced by the community that night was indescribable.
Going down towards the Plaza de España, on reaching the Edificio España or skyscraper, we turn left into the Calle de San Leonardo and arrive at the Church of San Marcos. This parish of San Marcos was definitively separated from the monastic parish of San Martin in 1836. The church had been built in 1753 on top of an older one.
The architect was Ventura Rodriguez, and this was his first and one of his best creations. It is a typical example of Madrid neoclassical architecture with Italian influence. The image of San Marcos is by Pascual de Mena, and there are sculptures by De Castro and Michel. The dome was painted by Luis de Velázquez. It depicts, among other things, the Battle of Almansa, won by Philip V over Archduke Charles on St. Mark's Day in 1707. And this is possibly the reason for the construction of this church. The so-called Cara de Dios, or Face of God, which came from the chapel of Prince Pio, is preserved in this church.
The charity board of this parish, wishing to procure resources with which to attend, according to its institute, to the comfort of the large number of needy people in it, begged Archbishop Claret to preach here, encouraging charity for this purpose. And now let us take our bearings and enter Plaza de España. Passing by the monument to the brilliant Cervantes, on our way to the Calle de Bailen. Leaving the new extension of the Senate on the left, we arrive at the Plaza de Marina along Calle Torrija, where we can contemplate the facade of the Senate, the former convent and college of San Agustin, which was expropriated. It is time to recall here that in 1857, all the archbishops were promoted to the rank of senators. But Claret, faithful to the principle of not getting involved in politics, declined this dignity. Turning right into Calle de la Encarnacion, we come to the Monasterio de la Encarnacion. The convent church of the Agustinas de la Encarnacion is located in the small square of the same name. It was founded by Queen Margarita, wife of Felipe III, around 1616.
The church is the work of Fray Alberto de la Madre de Dios and Juan Gómez de Mora. The facade, by the latter, was imitated thereafter in many churches in Madrid and in parts of Castile. After a major fire in 1755 as a result of the Lisbon earthquake, this church was rebuilt and improved by Ventura Rodriguez, making it one of the best in Madrid at the beginning of the 19th century. It has paintings by Carducho, Bayeux, the Velázquez brothers, Castillo, and others. These nuns lost the extensive orchard through which they communicated with the royal palace. For the Madrileños of yesterday and today, a visit to this church on the day of San Pantaleon, on July 27th, is a must to see the miracle, since on that day, according to tradition, the saint's blood liquefies and is offered for the veneration of the faithful, later solidifying again.
It was in this church that Father Claret, in April 1859, baptized the Moor Almanzor Keud, whose godparents were the king and queen. And now, crossing the Plaza de Oriente and passing by the best equestrian statue in the capital, dedicated to King Philip IV and the work of Tacca, with the collaboration of Galileo Galilei, Montañez, and Velázquez, we arrive at the Opera House. We leave the Royal Palace, which we visited on the first walk, and head towards the Metro de Ópera.